Adam, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I want to ask you perhaps the most basic question. You are known for threat modeling. What is your simplest definition of threat modeling?
So the simplest definition is using models to think about security or privacy, often proactively. And so I think we should threat model everything all the time. And the reason that people pull away from that is they think about threat modeling as expensive or slow or heavyweight. And if instead you think about it as a dial, we can say, oh, this application is going to process highly sensitive information. It's going to process payment information. We're going to turn the dial and do more threat modeling for that. We're going to go deeper. And if we're thinking about all of that preliminary risk questionnaire sort of stuff as threat modeling, which it is, we're using models to think about the question of what can go wrong, to think about security questions, then we start by threat modeling, and then we talk about doing some more of it. And when you think about that in a lean sense, we're going to do a little bit, we're going to do better, we're going to make it better tomorrow than it was yesterday, then the threat modeling is part of how we deliver technology. If we're building an app greenfield, start by drawing it on a whiteboard and talking about what can go wrong for 5 or 10 minutes. If we're building a new feature set, there's a new epic that we're working on, deciding if it's ready to take out of backlog and put into the next sprint. Spend a few minutes thinking about what can go wrong. What are we going to do about those things before you write the code so that you can write the code and not have to revisit the code when it goes through a security review in 3 months.
I'm hearing you say a lot of things that make me think about the different approaches to project management, waterfall versus agile. You mentioned the word lean. What are some tips that you have for people for keeping threat modeling agile? How do you prevent it from becoming this heavy thing that gets in your way?
So let me start by explaining how we threat model, which is 4 really simple questions that we talk about in the Threat Modeling Manifesto. And those questions are, what are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? And did we do a good job? And the first question is the key to keeping it agile, which is, what are we working on? If you think about what are we working on as we're building the whole shebang, you're not being agile. But if you think about what are we working on this sprint, then we can be agile about how we threat model. And if we bring back that dial metaphor and say, you don't need a 6-week project in your 2-week sprint to threat model your 2-week sprint, you need to think about what can go wrong with this feature. And I'm going to annoy some of my security friends, but I think that something between 60 and 90% of features that people work on have 0 security impact.
I see. Say more.
They will tell you, I will tell you that, yes, you can absolutely write a security flaw into any code you want. And as we think about secure development all up, we should think about testing. We should think about using good frameworks, but that's not dependent on threat modeling. When I say what can go wrong, I mean, we forget authentication, we forget authorization, we forget to log. We fail to deal with some of the security things that can go wrong in this feature. And so sometimes the features sometimes the all-up feature requires security sub-features as part of the epic. If we're thinking about that, and we're thinking, again, what am I working on in this sprint? Then again, we've got to go back to the dial and turn the dial way down and say, what do we need to do about this? And a lot of this thinking, my colleague Izar Tarandak has a series of articles and talks he's given on continuous threat modeling or threat model every story. And it's such a powerful shift to go from these heavyweight concepts to let's threat model this story. Let's actually take the question of what are we working on seriously and not scope creep and not decide we're going to have to boil the ocean and accept that there's a lot of stories where the answer is it's pretty simple.
We had somebody on the show a few months ago, Seth Law from Absolute AppSec, talking about secure design review. And I think secure design review and threat modeling sometimes get confused, sometimes get conflated. How do you differentiate the two for people?
So when I think about threat modeling as a big tent, a lot of the way I learned to threat model was really in design reviews, in architecture boards, in gateways to delivery. And there's a great quote from Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, who says you can fix it on the drawing board with an eraser or on the job site with a sledgehammer. And what I realized over time was a lot of the conflict that I had in my work resulted from people building software, coming to a design review, expecting a rubber stamp and not getting it. They'd already written the code, they'd already set a go live date. And at some point, I learned to treat those as design criteria for how we think about threat modeling. Why don't we design an approach to threat modeling that the developers can use, that the DevOps team, the SRE team can use so that they build the right thing out of the box? And by the right thing, I don't mean the thing I want them to build. I mean, I don't want them to get surprised by security requirements. We ought to be able to tell them about those security requirements up front, and threat modeling is the set of methods that let us do that.
Yeah, it's great to set them up for success. If they can, design with the threat model in mind, then it does become almost like a rubber stamp where you say, you know what, you did your job. We can go move on.
Yeah. And look, if you didn't do your job, well, that's a problem we need to deal with. But why would we design, and no disrespect to Seth here, by the way, but why would we design a process that we see, or why would we keep using a process when we see so much conflict coming out of it?
Yeah, maybe a good way to summarize it is right time, right place, right tool. To the extent possible, do your threat modeling up front, but sometimes over time, these things morph, and a thing was put on here and a thing was put on here, and maybe not everyone has visibility across all of those things, and that's where a design review is impactful.
Or yes, and maybe what we should do is we should think about accumulated security debt. And once we're comfortable doing some threat modeling and the engineers are used to doing it, on some sort of cadence, do a security debt pay down sprint where we update a more cohesive or all-encompassing sort of threat model, where we make sure that the features are not in contradiction to one another. And maybe that's on a sort of a timetable. We do it every 3 months, every 6 months. Maybe we do it when we have a bad pen test finding. Lots of reasons to do it. But if I introduce myself to a development team by saying, for the next month, you're not doing features, you're doing the security stuff you don't understand and aren't comfortable with, I am going to be the most popular person in some other room.
Yeah. Adam, you're really passionate about threat modeling. How did you get into it? You've turned it into a career, obviously, but how did this become something that you wanted to dedicate yourself to?
So when I learned to threat model, I learned it in sort of an apprenticeship way with other security experts doing design reviews. And in 2006, I took a job at Microsoft, and so I took a job at Microsoft, and I realized very, very quickly that I could not threat model all of Windows, never mind all of Microsoft's products. And so I had to figure out how to teach other people how to do this. And so I did that for a few years. And then I said, this shouldn't be an Adam thing, which is why I'm laughing at you a little at your question. And I said, I would like other people to pick this stuff up. And so I moved to a different job within Microsoft, and other people started doing it. And I realized that I had learned an awful lot about how to threat model and why we did the things that we did. And I wrote a book. And then 2014 or so, I left Microsoft and was working on a startup about some stuff I was passionate about. And people started calling me and saying, hey, I read your book. Can you come help us? Mm. And so it wasn't necessarily that I said, I'm going to go build a career on this. It was people read the book. They saw that there was a vision for being more proactive in how we threat modeled. And that's turned into a successful business.
You teach a lot of classes. What kind of profiles of people show up to these and attend these? You know, job categories, levels of experience. Who do you teach?
So, thank you. We teach a lot. We teach a very, very broad set of technical professionals. We get a lot of engineers, software engineers, hardware engineers. We get a lot of architects and security experts. We get a lot of SOC people, which surprised me. And what I heard from the SOC people that's exactly what I was doing when I started talking to them, was they said, the threat model is a map for incident response. It tells us what we need to deal with. And so we're pushing back on projects that want to ship without a threat model. Cool. Okay.
That makes sense.
And so threat modeling becomes a language. I've had lawyers when we teach medical device makers. We get a lot of regulatory professionals who translate engineering into the records that the Food and Drug Administration wants. One of the things that I really deeply believe, because I see it, is that people threat model better when they have and value a diverse team of participants. People bring their different life experiences to bear, and they say, I've experienced this. By analogy, something like that could happen to this system. And even though we have techniques like stride, kill chains, which allow us to be structured, making sure that there's room for people to go beyond those things brings out a lot of really interesting threats at a business level, threats to your unique business that you don't get out of a compliance framework or a checklist.
I heard you say that software engineers attend your class. There is a narrative in security that developers don't care about security. What would you say about that?
Is this a family program? I think developers do care. I think executives do care. I think what they don't care about or don't care for is an explosion of jargon. I think they don't care for the contempt that some of my peers will show to them. You know, it's hard to care. It's hard to trust or respect or collaborate with someone who said, your design is stupid. I can't believe anyone would write code like this.
Yeah, that's fair.
And you know, I think that if we work to make things accessible to developers, they care. And, you know, one of the ways that I have personally done that is I wrote a book, which is very serious with a silly title.
I was going to ask you about your book.
Okay. It's Threats, What Every Engineer Should Learn from Star Wars. And the goal of the book is really encapsulated in the title, what every engineer should learn. And I did that because I think engineers do care about security. And I also think that we need to make that information accessible. And the reason I put the Star Wars spin on it is, I mean, number one, Star Wars is awesome. But number two, and seriously, if you make things fun, people want to engage with them. And if you show up with a fire hose of acronyms and you show up and say, I need you to do this code differently, and you don't show someone why, then developers don't care about that version of security.
No, that's very true. And I'll say, as someone who's been an course designer instructor for a long time, the more you can help people relate it to something they already know about, the more likely they are to learn it.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe more of a fun question here. So there's 4 questions for your threat modeling framework. Do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite?
Like picking your favorite kid or your favorite pet?
No. My favorite question is, what can go wrong? It's the heart of threat modeling. It allows me to draw in a lot of Star Wars. And so I'll give a specific example. One of the threats we talk about a lot is spoofing. And the example that I like to use is Luke Skywalker pretending to be a stormtrooper. And the reason I like it is because normal people actually pick up on weirdness and discrepancies. And the first thing Princess Leia says is, aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper? Because I think there's so much of a teaching moment right there, because if we enable people to bring their skepticism, to bring their questioning curiosity to security, then they'll ask questions like that can help them avoid a scam. And so I just enjoy using Star Wars as part of the teaching, and I enjoy what can go wrong because Star Wars is full, absolutely full of things that go wrong from a security perspective.
That is very true. And I think what's fun about what can go wrong is it invites people to perhaps disagree with how something's been built, right? It invites that contrary perspective of, we built this thing and we love it, or we're going to build this thing and we love it. What are all the ways that it could hurt us?
Yeah. And it doesn't even need to be contrary. It can be exploratory. It can be curious. It can be, how do we make this thing work as well as we can make it work? Because none of us want to be here at 3 a.m. on a Saturday dealing with an incident.
What would be some advice that you would have for someone who wants to start a threat modeling program?
Start lightweight, start easy. Simply ask the 4 questions. You don't need data flow diagrams and arguments about what sort of diagram to use. You don't need stride. You don't need to produce a 50-page report. Ask, what are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? And did we do a good job? And the did we do a good job ties to the whole concept of lean and the whole agile concept of retrospective, and says, how do we do a better job? Do we need better diagrams? Why? What's the thing that makes us want a better diagram? What does better even mean to you and I? When we get into what can go wrong, maybe you find yourself stuck in the middle of a brainstorm, or maybe you're looking for a little more structure. And so a mnemonic like STRIDE, spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and expansion of authority, can help you answer that question in a more consistent way. And by the way, I say that really fast. I say it a lot.
It's impressive.
Thank you. It is the core of the Star Wars book, because for someone getting started, I mean, I'm going to say this, I might regret it. Even reading a fun little book like that is too much for someone getting started, right? Just ask what can go wrong. And as you get to what are we going to do about, not what are we going to do about it, as you get to did we do a good job, at some point you'll start saying, maybe we need a little bit more structure. We need to have more consistency when Adam and Jen are not in the room. And then you get into building it out and building it up. And if you start by trying to build something that's too big, too complicated, you can really inhibit your own progress. You can be your own worst enemy.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about maybe don't start with a book first. I think getting value out of a book, often you need some context to go with it, some experience, some failures, some successes. And so I could see, experimenting a little bit with the 4 questions, and, maybe you read the book at the beginning, but you might not understand it. And then you come back to it and it's there for you.
I hope that the threats book, the Star Wars book, is understandable. I definitely, and again, look, I'm proud of the work that I did in the threat modeling book. And also, it's a largish book. It's 600 pages. There's a lot in there. It's good stuff. And if you tell me I want you to start by reading this 600-page book to figure something out, everyone has other things to do with their time.
Yeah, you're going to get lost. You're going to get discouraged.
Yeah. And so I want to give your listeners permission to start really, really lightweight, rather than feeling they've got to read a book. Just ask those 4 questions, see what the answers are, get value, and then build as you need to.
It sounds like you really enjoy teaching. What do you find most fulfilling about it?
The thing that I really enjoy is, and this is such a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, is your students teach you what you don't know. The Star Wars book came out of someone asking me a question: where do I go to learn more about these STRIDE threats? I've got a white paper that I'm working on trust boundaries, because people demonstrably struggle with the concept. And when I talk to security people, it's like asking a fish about water. It is so obvious that they don't know how to talk about it, right? It is so it permeates our life, and we can't even explain it. And that loop of finding where the people I'm trying to help are not succeeding, helping them succeed, and seeing gives me a chance to dive deep into some of these things, which keeps me engaged. And really, I'm hopeful that in sharing these things, we move the conversation. And to go back to the thing you asked earlier about developers hating security, if I tell you have to understand this boundary thing, and you ask me what a boundary is, and I flounder.
It's not very credibility building.
Yes, right. And also, what am I going to do as a developer? Right? If you can't tell me what I'm supposed to be doing, and by the way, boundaries are things like firewalls, they're things like the user kernel boundary in a Unix system or between users, they're your VPCs, they're everywhere you have IAM. If I couldn't tell you that, then when you ask me what am I supposed to be doing, I can't give you a good answer and draw you into the work I want you to do.
Well, that's exciting that you get that opportunity. I'm really looking forward to your session at Lean AppSec Live. So we'll see you soon.
Sounds awesome. Looking forward to it.